Olha o som do beijo. Ai, eu era essa mulher louca, é?
Welcome to episode 11 of Let's Talk, the Afro Style podcast with Amaka and Camelia. Our guest, Nombe, is a German American singer songwriter who blends diverse genres into his songs with his soulful voice and infectious rhythms. Join us as we dive into his story.
I haven't used Zoom on this computer in a long time.
You got me fooled. The background looks good. The fit check is great. So this is Amaka. She's editor-in-chief of Afro Style. This is Noah. Hi, Noah. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure. Likewise.
Yeah, so thanks for squeezing in. I know that you've got a lot going on. How's the little one?
I feel like we all do,
Congratulations on the baby. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been super exciting, and it's great. Little one's great. He's getting into his little fussy era right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had a bit of a too easy time the first 3 weeks, and now, it's ramping up.
Well, I'm sure he enjoys these private concerts that he probably gets from you, as I've seen.
Yeah, definitely a lot of them.
He's got music in his blood for sure.
Yeah. I hope so. I mean, it's hard. Like as a parent, as you know, I try not to project my passions and desires. I'm gonna make it available to him, but ultimately, I don't want to be one of those parents that's like, you have to do what I do, or you have to be successful at what I'm passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, I mean, I have so much to say on the subject, but basically, I want to talk to you a lot about your art and life. The way that your art has become a part of your life, and and all the different evolutions. Because I think with really great artists, and I definitely see it in you. I've been a fan for ever, for real.
Yeah.
But to see how your work has evolved, and despite everybody's life ebbs and flows, to keep art as a part, like a living part of your day. So let's go ahead and dive in. So give me a little bit of an origin story, because I think I saw in a post recently that you were into dancing. Your first love was dancing before creating music, or is that true?
Yeah, I would say that was like my first. Music was definitely one of my earliest things I love, but as far as like a passion I've really pursued actively, dancing came first. I think my best friend still to this day, I met him in recess in like second grade, and there was this big circle, and I went to see what all the fuss was about, and it was this young Filipino kid just like spinning on his hand, and we were in second grade. He was already a full-on b-boy.
Oh, that's what's up.
And I this was in Germany, so like I spent my childhood in Germany as a mixed race American, with an American mother. And so she always made sure that I had these cultural, pieces like DVD. Like she would make me watch Fat Albert, and she would like get me breakdancing DVDs. She'd make me watch MTV. So I knew breakdancing from that. And my mom's from Brooklyn, and my mom was in the hip hop. She is the real hip hop generation.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I saw him dance in school, I was like, oh my God, that's like something I'm passionate about, but I don't have any peers around that yet. And so him and we formed this crew, and that's how I really ended up immersed in arts and dance. And, as a dancer, you are exposed to a bunch of music, whether it's funk, soul, house music. But I quickly realized I wasn't like the one in the crew who was like the best dancer, whatever. And I pretty quickly was like, I feel like I should be making the music. I feel like I have this calling to create, and that's where my dad came in. My dad was a drummer and an A&R, and he was always like, if you're serious about making music, let me like, show you some of these programs, and it's important that you learn an instrument. And so it was like it happened together, like dance, playing the piano, and then it sort of morphed into me becoming a music producer. Um, but it really stemmed from that culture, and I want to emphasize that actually because people forget that hip hop is a real culture, the way a nation has a culture or an ethnicity has a culture. So there's vernacular, there's practice, there's a dress code, there's dance, there's lingo, like, and so it's given me a lot. It's I spent all my teenage years at the YMCA. The first time I ever got paid on my own was through dance production. My first girlfriend I met there, you know what I mean? So like it really gave a lot, which hopefully young people still to this day that still exists. I see it less and less, but I'm also getting older, so but boy, I want to mention that because that is really the foundation, even for me musically. Even when I make rock music, alternative music, I make it from the mindset of a producer, of a hip hop producer.
Yeah. Was hip hop big in Germany at the time, or was it kind of an outlier? See somebody. Oh, it was huge when you
Yeah,
were.
hip hop's always been huge in Germany.
I always thought he was like an American, and that's where I'm all twisted.
No. I think hip hop became, I think because of the uniqueness of what hip hop is, it was quick to catch fire. I think that it was
Absolutely.
just one of those things where it was the music industry itself. I won't speak for other countries, but I'll say for in America, they had a problem allowing the hip hop culture to come to be a part of it. So it had to take people like the Will Smiths of the world to really push and say, "Hey, you guys are benefiting from what we're bringing to the table. So
Yeah.
if you're going to benefit from us, then you need to allow us in."
Yeah.
Because you had people like Run DMC working with Aerosmith in that Walk This Way, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
like
sure.
you are able to enjoy the fruits of the success of hip hop. You're going to let us in.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it.
So that was a huge influence on your earliest work, you'd say. And now I see that lately you've been influenced by Brazilian, like, is it Brazilian music or?
Yeah. I
So
mean,
tell me a little bit about some of your new stuff.
say that again. Sorry.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your newest stuff, your newest inspirations.
I've been obsessed with Brazil for really at the start of the pandemic. And I've always loved Brazil. I always knew about it. I was into soccer growing up. Um, and I think I had a very surface level idea of what Brazil was. But once I really dove into the music and the history of the music, and I had this crazy awakening. Like I don't know if you ever like tried like a nation's cuisine that you've never had, and you're like, oh my god, like I love Thai food now, right? Like the first time. So I had that with Brazil. I was like, oh my god, is anybody noticing this is like these are the best musicians on the planet? And so I want to say for a period, the entire pandemic, pretty much up until now, I play 50% Brazilian music in the house. Like if I'm cleaning, if I'm in the shower, whatever, and I listen very, very, very like what do you call it? Like thoroughly. I really listen to the arrangements a lot, and I research who the people are. I research the recording techniques, and last year I was just like, I have to go. I have to go back to Brazil. Like the first time I went was weird. It was in college. It was with my ex. It was like a week. It was very touristy. And so I wanted to spend like a good month on my own there. And I did. And it exceeded my wildest expectations. Like I met so many incredible musicians, legendary musicians that taught me about the history of different instruments. The There's so much to be said for their culture, and there's so many parallels to America because they've had a very, very similar civil rights movement in the 60s that was also very much based around, or not based around, but the art was the voice of it. So what we had, like Gil Scott Herons and Nina Simone's and stuff, they had Georgia Ben, Gilberto Gil and all the artists which now are called sort of the genre is called MPB,
MPB.
which is sort of the loose depiction of bossa nova,
That's
tropicalia.
dope.
But it's really a certain time. It's like they're classics. It's what us for us is like classic rock
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
stuff that's always on the radio, Hotel California, and all this.
yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
call that MPB. And these people, uh, in the 60s and 70s, you have to remember that they had a fascist dictatorship.
Hmm.
So they were, dissenting against the government as mixed Black people, people of many different cultural backgrounds, uh, inspired by what's happening in the US, but they were exiled. So a lot of those records were actually recorded in New York, in Sweden,
Wow,
all over the world because they weren't allowed to record that stuff in Brazil because
wow.
of censorship.
Yeah, yeah.
So I find there are so many similarities. The cultural melting pot, the history of Black people here, the history of Asian people there.
Hmm.
Brazil has the largest Japanese diaspora outside of Japan.
Huh.
Uh,
Wow.
they have thousands of intact indigenous cultures who have very little contact with the sort of modernized world. And you know, it is so 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 rich. So you can spend years there and keep learning and learning. But I wanted to sort of tap into the art of it, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I felt connected to it because I needed a sense of belonging throughout my whole life, being Black in Germany, being not Black enough for my family here, and sort of, or some of them. I don't want to like give any shade to my family because they've also been incredibly welcoming. But when you grow up mixed, a lot of times you play these roles, you know what I mean? And it's not just a skin color thing, it can be a class thing, you might have an uncle who's wealthy and then you are that person when you go to their house, you
Mm.
know. So I did a lot of that when I was a kid, and when I went to Brazil, I started to understand that identity has so much to do with geography and how what is passed down to you,
Hmm.
and it's very much a choice.
Yeah.
And and I identified with that in Brazil, and I realized that I wanted to create an album that catered to the the m- the musical legacy, I would say, of Black people around the world.
Mm.
And I choose my words very wisely because I'm not making an album that is sort of sounds West African, or I'm not making a hip hop album. I'm not making a political album. I'm making an album that is, as an Afro German with Caribbean roots, takes parts of the Caribbean, that observes what happened in Brazil, observes what happened with Afro Colombians, Black people in Chile, Black people in America and the US, and realizing there is like a commonality that every time we show up somewhere, we inject this really special thing into the culture. And
Hmm.
that's something I was going to say earlier, when you brought, you were talking about hip hop, is that the zeitgeist of the culture usually comes from the working class, which a lot of time is Black people and minorities, and queer people. And so everything from fashion to music
Yeah.
to dance,
Mm.
whether that's, you name it, whether that's house music, dubstep, reggae, reggaeton, soul, jazz, blues, hip hop, funk, soul. House music's from Detroit. Uh, Rock comes from blues. The first punk rock band was Black. No one ever talks about them.
What?
There's a great documentary called A Band Called Death. They were literally called Death, and they were like a punk rock band in the 70s,
Hmm.
before the Police, before the Clash, and all of it. So that is everybody's history. I'm not saying like, oh, black people are better than everybody else. I'm just saying like we
The
need that
foundation
needs to
pretty
be
much.
known. That is a
Well,
foundation of the culture that we're experiencing.
yeah,
And
I
so,
love how you brought up in Brazil, like the movement, and you said the 60s or 70s, where like black artists couldn't even record.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, and so their music was a form of rebellion, just being like, hey, we're making this music not to like overtly say stuff, but just to display the beauty that's within and to just like be able to make our own authentic music. That alone in itself is a rebellion because when something beautiful comes out, you can't look away. It's like, we're here.
Yeah, I
We're here, you
think
can't ignore
about
it.
a lot
You
of artists did that. It was just like in South Africa during the apartheid, you had people like Miriam Makeba and
Mhm.
who they would travel, they were exiled, they were banished from, and so they would had to go to other countries. And they were strong enough to still voice their opinion because there were people looking from the outside in, seeing that apartheid was killing the people of South Africa. So they were traveling, people such as the people he mentioned from Brazil and people like Miriam Makeba
Yeah.
traveling to other countries and speaking their truth through
Be
their
able to
song.
speak.
Mhm.
It just sucks to have to be silenced in the first place, but it almost is a catalyst for very powerful
Mhm.
work.
So let me ask. So basically, being that you were, I don't want to use the word experimenting because that's not what you're doing, but what is it about the music in Brazil that changed your thinking in comparison to other genres of music that you have worked on? Was it just,
question.
yeah, so was it something that you pretty much, as during the COVID period, you were able to really take a moment to sit down and listen and take in the Brazilian music, or was it just amalgamation of different things that, so what is it about that made you decide that stands out compared to other genres?
Well, I think I always loved it, but I think it was one of the things in my playlist that would pop up, and I never consciously realized that it was some of my favorite music till much later, till I was more mature. So
Mhm.
I was aware of these artists, um, but you know, um, when I got older and I started dissecting the music more, and I already had a couple albums under my belt, and I started to understand more how hard it is to make a great record, and then realizing how effortless it is. How effortless their music is, and
Mm.
how their musicality, they're almost being trained as kids through fun and exercises and marching bands and carnival to have this incredible rhythmic sensibility that is unlike anywhere I've seen in the world. Um, there is a lightheartedness and a fun in music that sometimes I think we forget. I think sometimes we're so trained in the US to if you want to be a musician, you have to pick a career. If you want to play, you got to go to Berkeley and be really good. And there isn't this like, let's all just play together in the house. Let's make music, which if you count up the hours doing that is way more powerful than 3, 4 years of college or whatever. And I think it shows in how effortlessly good it is. It's kind of like, my mom used to always say when I played the piano that I shouldn't look at my hands, that I always need to be looking up. And she said I should be smiling. And she said I have to, and I said it was hard. I said it's hard. I have to see what I'm doing. And she's like, well, you got to just practice harder so that you don't have to watch your hands anymore. And so there is an entire extra level when you acquire skill
Mhm.
to making it look like it's not hard.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that is an entire, like, it's years more to do that. It's one thing to play Chopin or Beethoven or whatever. It's another thing to just do it when it's 3 in the morning and you're tired and you're just like, okay, well, right?
You know,
And so,
I mean, like a muffin, because it's hard. It's hard to do, and it's easy to lose the fun along the way. And Amaka was asking, she's like, "Is Noah independent? You're independent. You produce your own music. You hold the licenses to all your music."
yeah, well, independent is a very, very abstract word. I can go into that a little bit if y'all want, but you
Yeah,
tell me.
I literally turned to Mark. I was like, "What does it mean?"
Independence, yeah, because I was telling her what it meant, but I was like, he may be independent, but that's something we would like to know.
So when we say independent in music, we don't mean the semantic word independent. We mean you're not affiliated with one of the major
Sure.
record labels.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Which I said, I was right. Okay.
There are really three, but really it's all Universal, like because Universal owns those. Um, uh, if you're signed to any indie label, you are an independent artist, meaning that they are, yeah, they are independent labels. However, they might still be big corporations. They still might give you a, you know, a really unfavorable contract. They might keep you in a contract for years and years and years. You might not own your music. So you can be independent and be in a terrible situation. Um, Now the other side of it is the independence as a creator who produces their own music, right? So like I produce and write most of my music. I do have songs that are co-writes and I enjoy collaborating, but I I started as a musician, you know, I started as a producer. I became an artist after college, you know, I never had the confidence to actually sing and come out in that way. So I am an independent artist by all definitions, but I don't own all my music.
Oh, okay.
So
I got
my
it.
first album was with another indie label that gave me a major label style contract.
Got it. Okay.
Don't own any of that music.
Oh,
Then my new label, who I'm very happy with, they were very sympathetic to that situation, and they signed fair artist deals. But they're a company. Like they have like a staff of like 50 people. They have, you know, departments and quotas and all this stuff. So people talk about independent, they think that you're the one dragging the instruments around, you do everything yourself, you call a radio promoter yourself and all this. I'm not that independent, you know, it's kind of like a spectrum, I guess is what I'm saying. Um, and the music industry is incredibly messy, incredibly complicated.
yeah, you know, Chappell Roan just won the New Artist Grammy, and her speech was literally like, "Hey, labels, maybe you want to help people out with healthcare." And
At the very least.
at the very least,
But it
I was like,
seems like they're
dude,
actually.
She's like, once I was dropped from my label, I didn't have anything on my resume. Like, what are you gonna do?
And
Like,
it looks like they're actually paying attention to that after she made that.
it's such a simple little thing that
But
people
why?
think about.
Question: why is it that people? I'm not going to generalize, but why is it that a lot of people would rather go for the big honchos when it comes to the record and label and not take a chance on themselves, especially if they've had that experience already? Why do they feel the need they have to stay? It's maybe after they realize they're not making as much money as they thought, and they want to now go away.
A lot of reasons. There is no genuine artist union. I think that's a big problem.
Oh,
And it's kind of a vicious cycle because in order to have a union, you would have to, a meaningful union that actually wields power, you would have to have powerful artists in that union. They're usually, once they're powerful, they either sign a deal or they already have signed a deal. So they're not incentivized to join a union because they're doing well. Like to make an extreme example, Drake is not motivated to be in an artist union. He's rich, right? So broke artists would want to start a union, but broke artists a lot of times don't have the leverage because the big labels have so much market share. The other reason, and this is probably a more, you know, realistic day-to-day reason why artists don't do that, is because it is so hard to do everything on your own. And you are so, at least with me, like I was so broke for so long, and my parents, you know, I didn't come from money either. So like by the time I'm in Hollywood and I finally get noticed by somebody who has an in, who, works at a big label or manages a poppin' artist.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, after constantly being told you're not good enough, you're not good enough, maybe you should give up, maybe you should stop, maybe you should quit. This is the artist's voice constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And now somebody who's credible says, I believe in you. And you're like, oh my God, this is my moment. This moment might never come again.
Mm-hmm.
And that person's like, I'm gonna give you $20,000 for all of your music for the next, let's just say 3 years. Usually it's in perpetuity, but let's just say 3 years. What kind of broke kid
Won't take it.
who's who's 20 years old is not gonna take 20 grand?
Yeah.
That's like I'm more money than I've ever seen. That's more money than I've ever known anyone in my family ever had. Just seeing that number in my bank account, I was like, oh my God, I'm never like, you know what I mean? Just believe I was.
Yeah.
And so once you do that, and once you see your music earn $500,000 or $1 million, and you realize you got only the 20 grand, like, oh shit, like this is all of my work. I'm still playing the shows. I'm still putting together the band. I'm still drafting PR emails and dressing myself and paying for everything. Not for everything. The label will obviously cover some things, but they're recouping it from you. So the reason that you're not seeing any more money is because they spend money on your behalf that they're constantly recouping. So it is really desperation, and the thing that's probably hard to measure that most artists have in common is that we're sensitive and we are inherently naive, and we are insecure. Whatever it is that makes an artist what makes them good is also what makes them really insecure. And so it is really easy for an artist to tell themselves that, maybe this won't work out. Maybe I need to endure this pain so that in 5 years I can buy myself out of the deal. This is the way we think.
Okay.
We're not stupid. We know we're signing a terrible deal.
Okay.
Might not know the full extent of how terrible, but we understand, okay, I don't own my records, and this has happened a million times before. And so at least I told myself, at least if I'm part of this label, this crew, I have so much more access to radio, to be real touring artists, you know what I mean? And so once my name is out there, like a chaperone or whatever, then I have more wiggle room and leverage to negotiate a better deal, to get out of it, to tour. But it's hard. It always comes down to like how good are you at this thing? How good are you marketing yourself, and
Well,
how good is your music?
yeah,
You know?
that's something that I really want to give you hats off to you, because on top of it's not just the love of playing and trying to keep from looking at your hands, there is so much your hands have to do, because you are very hands-on. You produce your own music. It's grinding work, but you have to literally be obsessed to do just part. And then there's the business shit. Pardon my French.
No.
But like, talk about your obsession. Like, how do you sit and mix and produce your own music, like hour after hour, day after day?
Does it drive you crazy?
Like, how do you not have a broken back? Like, I think, like damn. There has to be a level of obsession to get.
There is a complete level of obsession to a fault. I think I sabotage a lot of things because of it. Like I have friends that are artists that can't mix the record, that can't produce, and so they get other people to do it, and it frees up their time. Like you be surprised how much my managers are like, dude, like when are you able to deliver this thing? And I'm just like, well, I'm producing it, and I got a baby. And also, I'm making a live show, and also, like, I'm learning the fucking graphic design. And so they're like, bro, just pay somebody and let them do it. And then control freak me is like, they're not going to do it as well as I do.
I
Right?
want to do it. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, but then you get true
But
fidelity in your sound because it is coming out and it's not ready until it's ready. You're not letting someone else hold
yeah,
the paintbrush. So that's
I'm a purist in that regard, and like I think there's many different ways to success, first of all. But when I look at my role models, like Prince's, Gorillas, Tame Impalas, Quincy Jones's, they all have that thing that like it has to be right. I'm
mm,
going,
hmm
I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if people hate me in the end. I will not compromise the work.
That's what's
yeah.
And
up.
then and yeah, and it is very hard because there is a compromise. You know what I mean? Because they're often, for me, the hard part is how do I balance my relationships with them? And that is even as a dad,
hmm
because I don't want to be the dad who's successful but was never there. So
hmm
the
No,
hard part is
yeah.
no one talks about how good of a sibling was, Prince, how good of a parent was Michael Jackson. No one talks about that.
hmm
And so that is really the hard part, because you can also be successful and not be a micromanager. A lot of people, they're really good at delegating, but to answer, I tend to digress. I'm sorry, but to answer your question, also, I love what I do.
Mhm.
So I love producing. I love mixing. I'm very OCD. I love fidgeting with things. I love cooking. I Since I was a baby, I love the process of putting stuff together and seeing what happens, right?
Yeah.
And and so it never felt like a chore to me
Mm.
to produce, I have the sort of blessing and curse of having ADHD, and
Mm.
when I focus on something, I go so deep
Yeah.
down the rabbit hole that I need to know, how does this equipment work? You know what I mean? Like when you
Yeah.
look here, like I got all this like rack gear and
Oh
stuff.
my
Oh
goodness.
wow.
Yeah. I gotta say, he doesn't. Well, look, I'm so sorry to do this, but we gotta wrap up the conversation. But I do want to. You have is your most recent album, has it been released yet, or is it soon to come?
It's soon to come. May. I can't give an actual date yet.
Not to rush you or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's coming in May.
We have 7.5 minutes, so no worries. We'll let you know when we're done. No worries. Keep
But
going.
you're thinking May, like releasing in May?
Yeah, I'm thinking May because I really want it to be like a summer album. It's a
Awesome.
very joyful record. It's very upbeat. It's dancey. It's got a little Daft Punk influence as well.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
I always told people, like, people ask me, what's the new record sound like? And I'm like, it sounds like if Anderson .Paak and Daft Punk
Oh boy.
met Tame Impala in Brazil, kind of. So it's
Oh.
not like a full-on Brazilian record. It's definitely an alternative soul record
Mhm.
that takes a little bit of 70s chic
I
and
love
Daft
that. I
Punk
see.
Yeah,
I
totally
can
hear
hear
and
that.
that. I can
flip
see.
samples, and I'm rapping on some of it. But that's the vibe, and I think it is it's the most excited I've been for now. So I don't know whether it is my best work, you know what I mean? But I also don't. At the end of the day, I'm just trying to have fun, So I don't even care like that. I'm trying to just express myself in this stage of my life. So, and I think I'm doing that, which is good. So it's called Diaspora, which is funny because my ears perked up hearing like Diaspora come up in your brand name.
Thank you.
Mm.
Um, and what a great word. I think I was obsessing over the title of the album, and I was like, man, I got all these records. It's funk, soul, it's Brazilian, but it's
Mhm.
kind of all over the place. And then I realized in Brazil, diaspora is the overarching term of what I'm doing right
Yeah.
now.
It's about the that pretty much it engulfs everything into one little ball. That's the way I kind of look at it. Well, speaking of diaspora, Are you looking to work with African artists or? I have
Absolutely.
two questions. One,
Yeah.
ooh, sorry. One is ignore that. It was just my phone. But are you looking to work with African artists? Are there any African artists that you admire? And then two, I heard you a few times mention hip hop, which is pretty cool. Who are your influences when it comes to hip hop?
So actually I have a song coming out end of this week called Sugar Rush
I
with
saw that. I saw that.
artist. Yeah, this it's featuring an artist named Pongo.
Mhm.
Pongo has roots in Angola, but grew up in Portugal.
Okay.
So Portuguese is her native language,
Mhm.
and yeah, so stoked to have her on the record. I definitely want to work with more African artists. Started some conversations with different people. Um, there's an artist I recently discovered who's super new named Nalu, beautiful voice. There's an artist on our roster named Blackway who I would love to work with, who does like high life Afrobeat kind of vibes, and so yeah, absolutely would love to work with more African artists. And as far as the other question, the hip hop artist, like who I'm listening to right now, or like my influences.
In general, just in general, who have been your influences since hip hop has been in your life from the time you were a kid? And you can also bring it to now, but I'm just trying to figure out like your thought process when it comes to hip hop artists and how they influence your music.
I mean, I'm a real '90s kid.
That's my boy. That's my
Like,
boy.
how can you not be? They call it like the golden era for a reason.
Yeah.
I grew up. I'm gonna have to just rant because there's so many artists. I mean, A Tribe Called Quest is my all-time favorite.
Wow.
Nas, Mobb Deep. I listen to a lot of like b-boy, like hip hop,
Mhm.
90s, so like Fushnikins and I mean, obviously Tupac and so many artists. I actually love Cool G Rap.
Mhm.
I love Capone and Noriega.
So it's
Uh,
like pretty much a spectrum.
Oh, huge spectrum. Like I'm really like I listen to a lot of that stuff, and I'm also a big West Coast guy. Like I love um Cypress Hill and Daz Dillinger and Corrupt and all the G Funk stuff. I love G Funk, and so for me, Kendrick, I've been following Kendrick's career really closely the last few years, and he defies everything to me. He defies music. He defies culture and writing. He is, I think he's the greatest rap artist of all time. He might be the greatest artist of all time.
Mm.
If you had to measure him up against anything except for dance choreographies or whatever, right? He's not like Beyonce or Justin Bieber, but in terms of effort and messaging and consistency and music and authenticity and performance overall, I mean, is insane. And I was just telling somebody that he is, and he has a fucking. Sorry, I'm cursing.
That's okay.
he has
That's okay. That's okay.
he has a Pulitzer Prize. You know what I mean? Like most people, when you criticize his halftime show, for instance, I'm like the audacity for somebody to criticize a person who really comes from the bottom and defies peer pressure and this industry I was explaining, right? He has to deal with the same thing, the Shark Tank that we're in, and to not just perform at the Super Bowl, but to be the voice of a generation, to have culturally defining albums, not once but 4 or 5 times, is Bob Marley didn't do that.
Yeah.
And people have to remember Kendrick's still alive and he's still young, but usually people like that, they don't get to be 37 or whatever. Usually uh, Tupac made it to like 23, 24. And so for me, Kendrick, I'm rooting for him. And I'm just so happy we have somebody like that.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
You know what I
So
mean?
yeah, but I know that I didn't want you to stop talking, but we're now running out of time. But we want to thank you so much. Thank you so much. You really opened it. The fact that you're talking about things that we were talking about earlier is like, it's a good thing that we got to talk to you, because to hear your voice of reason in the industry you're in is amazing, and we get to learn more, and hopefully you get to come back and tell us more about what's going on.
Pleasure's all mine, and thank you so much for having me.
No problem.
Thanks for tuning in. Up next, final thoughts.